Hey, thanks for joining us today for Financial Foundations presented by Benchmark Wealth Management. My name is Elian Levatino. I am a financial advisor to CFP here at Benchmark. And for this particular session on retirement, I am joined by Shannon Acosta.
Hello, I'm also a financial planner in CFP at Benchmark.
And I love having Shannon here with me. As you can imagine, we consult a lot with each other and have some professional questions whenever we meet with people. And so I lean on Shannon a lot for this topic. She's very knowledgeable here, so I'm glad to have her with me. Shannon, we're presenting financial foundations in a way that people ask us questions, and they're foundational to a lot of what their planning ends up being for their retirement years. So good thing we're talking about retirement. We get a lot of questions around retirement, some more tricky than others, some more complicated. These might be the ones that might be more complicated, but we want to try to make it as simple as possible for the purposes today. So Shannon, why don't you hit the first one that you got presented with?
Sure. The question I'll address is, how important are expenses when it comes to retirement planning? I can't understate this. Hugely important. They are probably the most important number in any financial planning that we do. I think it's a little bit of a good news, bad news scenario. The bad news is it feels a little bit restrictive to say that. It might feel a little parental. It might be more exciting to say that you need to work hard to get your 401k as big as possible, or you need to stock money away in savings. But the reality is you just need to know what you're spending. If you know that number, you can plan more accurately for what the retirement savings number needs to be, and you'll end up having a successful retirement plan. The good news is you can completely control how much you're spending, and at any given point in time, you can find out what that is. A little bit of elbow grease required, but you can handle that, I'm quite sure. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to know exactly what you're spending, and sometimes it ebbs and flows. I'll talk about that in a second. But at the end of the day, whether or not you need $500,000 in retirement savings or $5 million in retirement savings is completely dependent on what you're spending. And neither one of those is right or wrong. It just depends on you. I think that I'm a little bit of an art nerd. I hope it's okay for me to use this analogy, but when I go to museums, I gravitate toward the Impressionism. And Impressionism is basically where they just use splotches of paint to create the impression of an image. Up close, it doesn't make any sense.
I learned something new today.
There you go. Up close, it doesn't make sense. It's not an image that you can really hang a hat on. But if you step back, you get the impression of a haystack or a water lily or something like that. It's pretty. But we really need your expenses to be more like a portrait.
What is that one?
Not
okay. Sorry.
Category.
Okay. Bring it back.
We need your expenses to look more like a portrait or a Renaissance painting, where they're very fine brush strokes, and whether you're up close or far away, you get the same image and level of detail. It's just more to your benefit that way. The clearer you have an idea of expenses. Create a mock budget. You know, your phase of life right now, your season and what you're spending is going to be different than when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. We see oftentimes, well, I don't know, Elian, how do you see clients' expenses evolving through retirement?
Well, I think Shannon and I see this a lot, which is why we're ping-ponging this question. When we build out expenses for retirement, expenses aren't always linear. It doesn't look like this. And you can see that in your life today. As life adds complexity, so goes your expenses. So I think throughout our life, we see things like this. Depending on when you're watching this video, inflation could be impacting your expenses also. The expenses look like this over a lifetime, but when you hit retirement, you usually see a pretty significant bump in retirement. And in my experience, it's usually because people are doing what they've always planned on doing in retirement.
They have more time.
They have more time. They get to travel more. They're chasing grandkids and kids around, and probably in different states, and just enjoying that time. And when you have that time, you see your expenses go up. Then when things slow down a little bit and you've been able to experience everything you wanted to experience, they come down. And then unfortunately, we all have medical issues as we age. And so your medical expenses, bring your total expenses up a little bit. Do you see that as often as I do? That
100%.
This is a little bit more like this in retirement rather than something linear?
100%, which is why it's important, we think, to account for that. You know, whatever you're spending now, you're probably not going to buy as many clothes. You may not go out to lunch as much, you know, with your work friends. You may not need to spend as much on your car maintenance, et cetera. But let's account for the extra fun stuff that you're going to want to do. Because Elliot's right. It's not going to be linear. And it's not a crystal ball. You can't predict everything entirely. You can't
just do your best.
Just do your best. And that's going to be a little bit closer to that, you know, portrait style painting that we want to see. Anything else about expenses and how important they are in retirement?
No, but when we're talking about retirement, jumping a little segue into my question is, it's not as much what you're saving for retirement as it is what you're spending. But where do you save for retirement? Where do you go for all of that? And really, it depends on. It can depend on where you're working. Let me back up a little bit and zoom out and try to say we'll try to keep this really simple, because all these different retirement accounts can get complex. But I want to break these up into two categories. I want to break it up into employer plans and non-employer plans, things that are more individual. The only thing that makes a retirement plan is the tax code. How is that particular account taxed? Now, you have the employer side, where you have all these numbers and letters that can sometimes confuse people and can make it a little intimidating. You hear the word 401k or 403b or 457, and you're like, I can't keep up with all these numbers.
That's just tax code.
It's just tax code. It's just numbers. When they wrote out the tax code, they said in section 401, subsection K, we want to create retirement plans for your employer. In section 403, subsection B, it's the same plan. It's just for nonprofit organizations. Section 457 is about municipalities and some utilities and that kind of thing. Try not to make it too confusing.
It's not as complicated as they make it seem.
No. Don't let the numbers intimidate you. Just know that you can put money into a retirement plan inside of your employer plan, or you can go outside your employer plan. Not everybody has savings that they can put into an employer plan, because the employer doesn't offer a plan. You have to go outside of that. When you go outside of that, you've heard the terms IRAs and Roth IRAs and those types of things. IRA stands for Individual Retirement Arrangement. Again, try not to let the letters and the numbers can make things more complex than they have to be. I, meaning individual. This is a private plan for you. It is outside your employer's scope. It is your plan, and it is privately held. What makes all these different is how they're taxed. When you put money into a 401k on the employer side, or whether you put it into an IRA on the individual side, the good news is that money's not taxed today. So if you make $50,000 and you put $5,000 into a retirement account, whether it be with your employer or with a regular IRA, the good news is you're only paying tax on $45,000.
That sounds nice.
You're not paying the tax on the full $50,000. So you're getting the tax break today, and that money grows until you get ready to retire. And then when you're ready to take it out, the bad news is that it's all taxed on the back end. The money you put in and the money it grew. So the money you put in plus the growth, all of it is going to be taxed. A little bit of a bummer, but at least you set aside a whole lot of money, and it's gotten some growth over the 30 or 40 years that it's been in that plan. Alternatively, you can have a Roth IRA. And more today, we're seeing Roth options inside of 401ks. What makes a Roth different is if you make $50,000 and you put $5,000 into a Roth retirement plan, whether it be with your employer or outside Roth IRA, one that's private, you're still paying tax on the full $50,000. You put $5,000 into a Roth, but you've already paid tax on it.
And you can't touch it until you're almost 60.
There's some limitations to when you can take it out. But when you're ready to take it out, the money you put in plus the money it grew is all tax-free. You don't ever pay tax on that again. More importantly, you're not forced to do anything later in life like you would be with 401k or an IRA. We won't get into minimum distributions, but there's some forced distributions later in life after you're 72 that are forced on you from money in a 401k or an IRA. Again, don't want to make it too complex. Just know there's the tax differences and the differences in employer versus non-employer things on the individual side.
So would you ever want to use both categories, the employer plus the individual side of things?
Yes, depending on the tax advantages in your particular situation. It could be that you want to put money into the employer side, and then you want to jump to the individual side, and then back to the employer side. A lot of that depends on if your employer is giving you a match, or if there's even an option to have an employer plan. There's a lot of factors that go into this, and this is where a financial advisor is going to come in to help you decide, okay, if we want to save $5,000, does $2,000 go here, $1,000 go here, $1,500 go here, $500 go here? How do we mesh all these things together? We want to take advantage of employer-free money. We want to take advantage of the tax code, not tax evasion, but we want to be tax efficient in what we're doing. So the tax efficiencies that come inside of all these, we want to play them all together and make sure that you're going to have as much benefit today and as much benefit tomorrow.
So your situation, to recap this, is going to be different than your neighbor's situation.
Absolutely.
Because you both work in different places, you make different quantities of money, you have different family situations or whatever. But the elements that you just described are kind of like threads that we want to try and weave together in the best way possible to make a plan that will be good for you today and good for you tomorrow. And we can help you if you want to know what your 403B and how that's different from a 401k and all that stuff that seems complex. We love to talk about, obviously. And I think we can boil it down in a way that's not threatening and it's easy to understand.
Yeah, that's our jam, as I said. We're all over that. So reach out. If you don't come talk to us, go talk to somebody else, but make sure you understand all the tax implications, how that impacts your future, knowing what your expenses are going to be when you retire, and being able to build your retirement plans, your 401ks, your IRAs, and everything around what your expenses are going to be in retirement. And we think you're going to find a lot of success. Does that wrap that one up?
I think so. I'd add one asterisk. If you're self-employed, slightly different rules apply to you. Honestly, I think it's to your benefit often, but let us know and we can help you talk specifically about the bucket for you if you're your own boss.
We didn't talk about SEPs. We didn't talk about simple IRAs. We didn't talk about some of the other extenuating things out there, but there are quite a few things. So make sure you reach out, get a bunch of good information, decide what's going to be best for you, and then we would love to help you execute it when that time comes. Again, Elian Levatino, Shannon Acosta, Benchmark Wealth Management. This has been Financial Foundations, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.